I worked as a security guard for a small business that rented office space in an aging, run-down structure. My responsibilities were pretty simple: watch over things, ensure that everything was secure, and report any unusual behavior. It was a quiet job, and most nights were uneventful, up until I started working in that eerie office complex. I felt a chill down my spine the first night I set foot there. It appeared as though forgotten secrets were weighing heavily on the air. The dimly lit hallways appeared to go on forever in front of me, and the nearby fluorescent lights' flickering glow gave the area a spooky feel. However, I dismissed it as a figment of my imagination. Remember, ghost stories are just that. Stories. I kept having the feeling that I was being watched as I went about my business that night. My spine tangled as I heard whispers coming from unnoticed corners. The words remained elusive, as if they were pieces of a lost conversation, despite my best efforts to understand them. Though I put it down to the wind rustling through the vulnerable structure, I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. As time passed, the encounters became more common and strange. In the corner of my eye, I could see the shadows dancing along the walls. I occasionally caught glimpses of figures darting silently between the cubicles, but they always vanished before I could get a good look. The building seemed to have its own life, and was eerily alive at night. One particularly unsettling night, a thick fog seemed to appear out of nowhere as I made my way down the dimly lit hallway. My breath hung in front of me like a vaporous mist as the temperature dropped to an icy cold. I could make out a figure through the mist, a ghostly apparition that was so light and ethereal that it seemed to be blending in with the mist itself. It moved smoothly, cutting through walls as if they were nothing more than wisps of smoke. My body tensed up, and I began to perspire icily. Something kept me rooted to the spot, even though I wanted to run away from the presence that was frightening my very soul. The ghostly figure turned to face me, its hollow eyes filled with an indescribable sorrow. Never before in my life had I sensed such a terrifying presence. Another incident took place in a setting where business appeared to be mired in the past. The room was so strange, as if someone had quit working there decades ago and never returned. The air was thick with dust and reeked horribly. The desk was covered in papers that were faded and yellowed, and I had forgotten what was written on them. A dark era seemed to be beginning, but what really gave me the creeps was the old typewriter that was perched on the edge of the desk. Its keys started to clank on their own, as if trying to communicate with the afterlife. The sound reverberated throughout the office, enveloping the silence with an otherworldly rhythm, and I was immediately chilled to the bone. The time had come to halt. That evening, after leaving my security post, I dashed out of the building. I simply could not endure remaining there for any longer. I quit my job the following day for personal reasons, but deep down, I knew that my true motivation was fear. What I saw in that office building is still a mystery to me. The old structure may have concealed a terrible table of tragedy and despair, or it may have been the restless ghosts of long-gone former workers. In the early morning hours, when everything is quiet and the moon is full, I occasionally find myself wondering. I wonder if the new security guard who took over for me has had similar spooky experiences. For their sake, I really hope they haven't. I do know the truth though, and that will always trouble me. The office building was a place where the living and the dead coexisted, where spooky apparitions and other unexplained phenomena roamed freely, and where nightmares materialized into dreadful realities. It was an experience that served as a reminder to me that there are some things in this world that defy explanation and hide in the shadows, just waiting to be found by those who are curious. It may sound relaxing to spend the evenings on duty as a security guard in a museum, just strolling around, keeping an eye out for theft, and taking in the silence. My experience, however, was anything but tranquil, I'll tell you that much. It was actually incredibly frightful. The museum in question was a dilapidated, ominous structure. Ancient artifacts and ominous artwork decorated its halls. Daytime visitors came and went, admiring the exhibits as if they were any other museum. However, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the final guest left, a new energy began to permeate the space. I had the duty of making sure the museum was secure since I was the night guard. I traveled around the exhibits in dimly lit exhibit halls and along dark corridors. Everything initially appeared to be normal. Then, though, I started to notice odd and mysterious happenings. It began in whispers, soft, hardly audible whispers that appeared to come from empty rooms. I initially dismissed it as a figment of my imagination, but as the nights wore on, the whispers got louder and clearer. It appeared as though the walls themselves were hiding things that were clamoring to be heard. In the middle of the night, as I was going about my business, I noticed a moving shadow. I turned, hoping to see a late-night cleaner or another security guard, but nobody was there. There was nothing but a pitch-black hallway. My brow began to frost over and my heart began to race. For being so jittery, I criticized myself. Perhaps it was just a trick of the light, or perhaps I was beginning to feel the effects of fatigue. But I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. The incidents grew more frequent as the nights went on. A loud thud would be heard as items would mysteriously fall from shelves and hit the ground. I would be startled out of my delusion of security by the sound as it would resound through the empty hallways. Every time, I jumped into an investigation only to discover nothing out of the ordinary. It appeared as though the museum were actively engaging in a dark game. The strange occurrences got worse over the course of several nights. I was constantly alert, jumping at the shadows, and straining to hear whispers that seemed to be just out of my hearing range. But it was one particular night and one horrifying event that finally broke me. The museum was otherwise silent, but as I made my rounds, my footsteps could be heard. The atmosphere in the building seemed to be holding its breath because it was so tense. A closed door abruptly slammed shut with a loud bang as I passed by. I stumbled backward while barely maintaining composure as my heart nearly leaped out of my chest. I remained motionless as I tried to process what had just happened. That door slamming shut had no logical justification, not even a slight breeze or draft. It appeared as though an ominous force had intended to startle and frighten me in order to get rid of me. There it was. The clincher came at the point. I was at my wit's end. My hands shook as I struggled with the keys to unlock the door as I hurried to the security office. Once inside, I gathered my belongings and made the decision to leave this vile place behind. I couldn't help but look back at the museum as I moved in the direction of the door. Silent and menacing, it stood there, and for a split second, I believed I saw a figure standing at the top of the stairs, intently observing me. A ghostly silhouette, it was illuminated by the otherworldly radiance, and that precise moment, I knew in my bones that the museum was hiding things that were much darker than I could ever imagine. As a visitor or security guard, I never went back to that museum. My psyche has never fully recovered from the experiences I had during those haunted nights. I came to understand that some locations are home to a history that endures through the ages and can sometimes manifest in mysterious ways. I still carried the ghostly recollections of those terrifying nights in the recesses of my mind. The museum had held secrets and energies beyond the scope of common understanding, with its antiquated artifacts and menacing artwork. There, shadows danced in the night, whispers resounded through empty rooms, and the line between reality and the supernatural grew hazy. I couldn't help but feel that there was a history and a story hidden within those walls. A story that hadn't ended when the museum's doors were shut for the evening. The things I saw weren't just coincidences or imaginative fabrications. In those halls, there was a deeper, unexplainable force at work. I was a security guard working the night shift at a revered cemetery, and little did I know that my assignment would become a terrifying nightmare. It got off to a fairly innocent start with the typical sounds of rustling leaves and far-off owls hooting. However, as the nights wore on, a menacing presence started to emerge. One fateful evening as I patrolled the cemetery grounds, a chill ran down my spine. My entire body felt uneasy as the temperature dropped and the air became icy. My shoulder was also lightly touched by the cold. I spun around, hoping to catch a coworker pulling a practical joke, but all I saw was the eerie silence. Whispered words with an otherworldly weight were carried on the wind. Although barely audible, they were haunting. They remained as elusive as the ghosts that prowled among the graves. Despite my best efforts to understand what they were saying, I had the impression that the dead spirits were beckoning to me from the other side of the veil, their presence inexplicably connected to the sacred space. Before my eyes could fully comprehend the shape of the shadows, which were dancing and swaying and moving with an ethereal grace, they vanished into the mist. They appeared to be alive and were infused with enigmatic spectral energy. In a delicate balance, the living and the dead coexisted in the cemetery as it was transformed into a theater of the macabre. The nights became a surreal tapestry of ghostly occurrences. As they appeared out of nowhere, hazy figures began to weave through the tombstones. They wandered aimlessly through the foggy cemetery landscape as I caught glimpses of them, eerie echoes of the past. They appeared to be stuck on this level of existence and unable to leave it. The encounters grew more frequent and unsettling as the days turned into weeks. The ghosts became more assertive. They were no longer satisfied with a passing glance to indicate their presence. The nighttime air was filled with the ethereal moans and sighs, and I could hear their echoed footsteps all around me. Within those haunted grounds, there was no clear distinction between the living and the dead. The apparitions were agitated one night in particular. The already blurry figures became even more obscured as a thick fog covered the cemetery. I moved forward despite my anxiety, my heart racing. Suddenly, the silence was pierced like a knife by a woman's mournful cry echoing through the night. It was a sound that rang with agony and despair, and it gives me shivers. In a desperate attempt to locate the source of the sound, I turned in its direction, but nothing could be seen. The woman's cries persisted, stalking me from a distance. She seemed to be imprisoned within the cemetery's spectral grasp, her tortured spirit shackled to this unholy ground forever. The straw that broke the camel's back was that. My soul was pierced by their cries of agony, and I experienced a crushing sense of helplessness as a result. I was overwhelmed by the realization that I was only a bystander in a world beyond my comprehension. I made up my mind at that precise moment that I could not bear to spend another night dealing with these supernatural occurrences. My hasty steps resounded loudly in the deserted hallways as I walked back to the security office. I felt as though an unseen force was urging me to leave because of how much the supernatural encounters weighed on me. My hands shook with anxiety as I gathered my possessions. I gave the old cemetery that had turned into my personal den of horrors one last look before exiting into the crisp night air. The grave markers, the statues, and the landscape were illuminated in an unsettling glow by the moon, which was low in the sky. I had the impression that the dead were saying goodbye to me and accepting my departure for their haunted world. I made a heartfelt vow to never go back to that eerie location as I resigned to the wind. I eventually left the cemetery behind, its mysteries and ghosts imprinted in my mind forever. The terror I felt while working as a security guard will always be a chilling reminder of the danger in some places, where the thin line separating the living from the dead is easily torn. Curious visitors will keep flocking to the old cemetery, but they will never fully comprehend the horrors hidden beneath its sincere exterior.